here, so I've got some.
Okay, please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There are no agenda adjustments tonight, and this meeting is being videotaped. Public comments? Any comments from the public? Nope. Okay. I ask for a motion to approve the set of minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Motion made by Norwell. Second by Abington. Any discussion? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Motion carries. Reports. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the report, document 3 in your package for March of 2019. We're 9 months into the fiscal year. On the cover, again, spring sports have started. We have a little bit of lacrosse and girls softball. And again, as Cody mentioned last month, there was an alumni hockey game that took place since the last meeting. And there's a picture that was posted of, Coach Marini and all the Derek, Coach Derek, and his players. So, page 1 has the cash position. Again, overall, at the end of March, cash balance little bit above $4.1 million. The OPEB reserve account is at $662,000. So again, that's doing very well from a financial standpoint. We moved the money into a higher interest account, so that's growing about $1,100–1,200 a month. Plus, we put a piece of our budget into that $35,000. I think this year we'll go into that from the current budget. So overall, we're in a strong cash position with all of our accounts. Next page is our revenue. Again, we've gone through and we did the billing of our member towns, the 8 member towns on April 1st. The money was due. And as you can see, the revenue for this month, Abington, Norwell, and Situate had prepaid their numbers before the due date. So we have $666,000 of revenue during March from our towns. All the other towns, their money did come in after the April 1st deadline. So it's everybody's paid for, and we're doing fine. The other accounts that we have, investment income, some miscellaneous income, and of course the Chapter 70 money, which comes in monthly of $361,000. So overall, our revenue for the month was $1,033,000. So again, everything's coming in as expected. There's no surprises with the way the revenues are flowing. And the final page is the expenditures. For the month of March, again, just a hair over $1 million was spent during the month. Again, mainly in payroll, health insurance, other items. Again, as things we're starting to wind down, we have the last couple months of the fiscal year in our sights. We go through and starting to do some projections as far as where our spending is through today, what we think it will be for the last couple months, and at some point Tom will present some items to the committee for if there's any surpluses that have been recognized for the end of the year. So, but overall, everything's the train's moving in the right direction. Again, Sylvia and Trish are doing a fabulous job in the business office. I know I say that every month, but it's seamless. Tricia and Crystal just got back from a conference for Tyler, our Infinite Visions software people. We're moving more and more onto the cloud-based systems from an accounting standpoint. The staff is now able to punch their time in remotely through the computer. A lot of our purchase order stuff is now in the cloud with workflow. So we are moving in the 21st century with the way that we're handling the office, with the business office and so forth. So it's very exciting. It's exciting for Tricia and for Sylvia to be up and running in a new realm of technology. And I think it'll overall make the staff's life's a little easier with their, getting rid of some of the paper that flows through. So overall, things are going well.
Thank you, Jim. Can I get a motion for the
Motion.
treasurer's report? Motion made by Handel, second by Norwell. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Jim, do you have any other?
No budget transfers for this evening, no.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Chairman, nothing from the chairman tonight. Subcommittees, Policy Review Subcommittee. You'll have in your packets a list of the recommended policies for the subcommittee. This will be placed on the May agenda for further discussion. Audit. Now we'll hear from Bruce Nolan. Bruce?
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll stand up.
Yeah, sure. Go to the microphone.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you.
For those who don't know me, I'm Bruce Norling. I'm the owner of the CPA firm that does the audit of the financial statements. And I'm here tonight to give an overview of our audit that is completed. And each of you at the table there has a copy if you want to refer to it. So we, with our staff, audit transactions and test the system of the school, and we do a lot of selections. When I say that, maybe we might look at 40 or 50 items in many of the cycles, such as payroll, and we look at some of the purchases of the capital assets here. So we do a fair amount of testing. Jim, the treasurer, is quite competent, and of course he does most of the work in the sense that we give him our selections and he pulls information for us, answers questions, and is along with his staff. So it is generally a pure audit situation where we're auditing the numbers that Jim and his staff puts together. Putting together, however, this financial statement, this whole package here, is quite a task, and I think we work together with Jim to do it, and so our final result is we have an opinion of the financial statements that everything is fairly stated, and we also audit in accordance with government auditing standards, so we do the work we need in order to say that, okay, the auditing of the contracts and agreements, as well as the system of internal control, meets the requirements in accordance with the government auditing standards, as well as actually generally accepted auditing standards are met too. So we really do a thorough audit, I believe, and so that's good news that the reports we have no findings, and I think your controls are very adequate here, and based on our testing, we had no exceptions. So of course, we don't test everything, or far from it, but we do a pretty good cross section of all the transactions that occur. On the financial statements themselves, if you'd like to, I can look at the page 39, which is the budget versus the actual results, and what it shows is that you're pretty much on budget. The overall bottom line is on budget. Your revenues were a little higher than you expected, but your expenses were a bit higher than you had budgeted. But so it all came out pretty close. So I would say that you do a good job managing your budget to stay within it. And also, I think you manage at year end reserving money, setting money aside for future projects. And I think that's another way of how you manage to also keep the state happy, that you're not retaining too much dollars in this. In fact, I'm going to also flip to another page. If you flip to page,
Bruce, do you have another one, please?
I do. Jim,
I
Jim
got
has
plenty.
it.
Oh, just holding out on me. Thank you.
There you go. Oops, sorry.
If you flip to page 13, near the bottom of the page, it has your fund balances, and the unassigned fund balance of $713,000 is acceptable with the state, that you've not exceeded their requirements for having kind of unencumbered money, and what's the buzzword for that, Jim? Reserve?
Excess and deficiency.
Yeah, no excess and deficiency in this particular number. So, but just above it, you have some committed amounts that you voted to put aside for future projects. So that's how you manage the process to stay within your budget, yet you're still able to put some money aside for future projects and to keep the state happy. And I've audited it, and it appears to be correct. There is a couple of pages I just saw, I mentioned. Page 17 and 18 are not part of the budget, but they're the OPEB money that Jim referred to about 10 minutes ago that you're maintaining to fund the future OPEB payouts. And then there's also student activity funds and some trust funds. I think there's some scholarship funds. So these pages, 17 and 18, show the control of those monies that are not in the budget. If you're curious about what those pages are. The only black cloud over the organization is financially is the OPEB and the pension obligations, which are there in many of the government agencies. That is an estimate. That's a fairly large liability. It doesn't affect your budget so much now, but maybe in 20 years it will affect if you can't fund that. But as far as the operating budget and how you did in 2018, I thought you did really well financially. I thought you kept within what you had to do, and I think with no findings in the finances, I think that you should be congratulated. It was a good year, and so it's on to 19. Any questions? Anybody?
Yes, I have
Yes,
one.
yes.
Two, actually, Bruce. There's been quite a bit of chatter this year in the associations about to make sure if we wanted to spend our E&D money, it is certified. And I believe Jim told us it was
It
certified.
was certified last month, yeah.
Last month?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll discuss that afterwards.
Okay.
From the chatter. And the other thing is the revolving accounts, about using them for the purpose and not hoarding them and creating funds. Did you find any problems there?
I didn't find any problems with it, with the revolving funds.
Enterprise accounts?
Yes, you know, like the shop or the, you know, the place across the street, across the hall there, you know, the hairdressing and so on. I don't see abuses there. You know, the restaurant here, I mean, at least I didn't know. If I did, I would say, but I thought that I didn't see any hoarding or excessive amounts of keeping profits.
Okay.
One of the things, Bob, on that is that the state requires us now to have our student activities funds audited every 3 years.
Yes.
And Bruce did an audit for us last year on our student activities funds. It's just a separate little piece that he does. They do a more intensive look at all the transactions. We had to give him every check that was written through the enterprise funds, all the money that came in, and they specifically tested the enterprise funds for making sure the money was properly classified, all the expenses related to whatever the enterprise fund it was with, that it was signed off on, and so forth. So that's part of the state's, you know, they don't need us to do it every year, but every 3 years now, they're looking for us to get a detailed audit of the activity funds, so.
I mean, I guess if the auto body shop were making $200,000 a year, it might be something that I wonder, you know, what are they doing? If that's what you mean, Bob, you know, I just didn't see any indication of that.
Beyond the, let me ask you while he's here on the other question I asked on the certification. Was it done before we did our budget, or was it after we did our budget? That was one of the big questions they brought up. And according to some of the chatter on it, we shouldn't be using our E&D until the budget's certified in our next budget.
I think our budget was certified, but we don't typically use the E&D. The only time in my term here that we've used
Surplus
E&D,
revenue.
the only time we used it was when the boiler project was a matter of, we're gonna use up to 300,000 of E&D to fund the boiler project, so we didn't have to go back to the town. So other than that, we specifically have not, we did a little bit last year in July to fund a couple of the additional programs. But again, we at that point last year, if you remember, the state came through during their audit last year and identified a compensated absence policy that we had on the books, and they said that was now disallowed, and that put us to the point where we were at the ceiling of all of our E&D. So the committee last year, I think it was $117,000 that was allocated from E&D to fund a couple capital projects to give us a little breathing room under that, so we
That
weren't.
was not necessarily the capital project, but reduce our budget to the cities and towns
Yeah.
they brought up to.
Yeah, we're not using it to reduce, we're not using E&D as a function to fund any of our budgetary costs, so.
Okay. No further questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Council.
All right. If there isn't any others, then I'm gonna say thank you for your help.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, Bruce.
And,
Thanks, Bruce.
hope to see you next year.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the auditor's report for
Seconded.
fiscal,
Motion made by Norwell, second
last
by...
fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Motion made by Norwell, second by Hanover. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
See you, Bruce.
See you.
Safe
Take care, Bruce.
travels.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from the Superintendent Director. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first item in my brief report, a budget update. It took 2 nights, but we did secure Whitman's assessment. I'm sorry, I was in Whitman earlier. Situate's assessment on April 8th and 9th. They typically have the earliest town meeting, and so they approved our budget. They had many other warrant articles that led to the budget not being looked at prior to 11 p.m., so it carried over to the next night. And as you know, we'll have Cohasset's town meeting coming up at the end of April, and then we have 5 town meetings on the first Monday of May, and then and I will be in Whitman that night. And then we end with our town meetings with Abington having the last of all of our communities in the district. And later this evening at about 8 o'clock, Jim and Tom and I will be teleporting to Abington for Abington Finance Committee meeting. And that will probably be the last of the Finance Advisory Committee meetings for this budget cycle. Item 2, Spring Program Advisory Meeting Update. We had good attendance. Thank you, Bob Mola, for representing the school committee coming to our spring advisory. As you know, we have 2 advisory meetings per year, one in the fall, one in the spring, and then we have a general advisory dinner. And I'll direct your attention, if you have your calendars, that's going to be May 9th at 6 o'clock. If you are available to come, Susan will ask for your availability so that we can get a sense of seating and capacity and whatnot. That's a great opportunity to hear from the respective chairs of the committees. We're going to, the goal that I've asked the administrators to deliver on is to provide basically the written reports of the respective committees in advance so that we can send them out to committee members, so you have an opportunity to digest in advance what will likely be reported by the committee chairs. So that'll make for an efficient evening and an opportunity for dialogue and questions as well. So again, that's going to be May 6th at 9 o'clock.
May 6th or May 9th?
Excuse me, May 9th at 9 o'clock.
May 9th at 9 o'clock.
Let me try again.
May 9th at 6.
May 9th at 6
May
o'clock.
9th at 6 o'clock. There will be no 9 o'clock dinner.
What did Whitman do to you?
Yes.
That's a Thursday night.
I've got to read my paper right in front of me. Goodness gracious.
That's a Thursday night?
That is a Thursday night.
That's a good take.
And lastly, item 3, legislative breakfast. We have been looking at some dates, and it looks as though the best date for the majority of our legislative delegation, a combination of the actual legislators or their legislative aides, would be Friday, May 17th, 8 o'clock a.m. And generally what we've done in the last few years is we'll have a breakfast here in the restaurant, followed by a brief presentation from me and an opportunity for dialogue. Committee members, if you're available, it'd be wonderful to have you meet and continue to develop relationships with our legislative delegation. I'll mention while I'm talking about legislative delegation that I want to voice my appreciation for Representative Dave DeCoste, who I contacted prior to the end of the House budget amendments. There was a window for filing House budget amendments, and I asked him to consider filing an amendment to the budget on our behalf, which would afford us $250,000 toward expenses toward career and technical programming. There are many such amendments that get filed to budgets. This would not be anything radical or unique, but it is something that I think would be appropriate to have some consideration. It doesn't just magically happen. Obviously there's a Senate budget, then there's a conference committee, but it is certainly a point that you have all made in your own way, and I've said as well, which is that we need continued funding in order to keep the top-notch programs we have. So if there's any traction with that amendment, I'll certainly let you know. It'll be something I'll be mentioning at the legislative breakfast as well. And an item I didn't have on my report that I would just like to mention is that next week we'll have a 3-person team coming in from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. We would have mentioned this briefly back in the summer or the beginning of the school year. We are now in the middle of our 10-year decennial 10-year accreditation. For regional vocational schools in Massachusetts, what's unique is that NEASC does a mid-cycle check-in, which is at the 5-year mark. It's not a very onerous process. I spoke with the chair, who's coming in. They'll be coming in midday on Tuesday for a tour. Basically, they take the report and they basically are the boots on the ground to double check some of the recommendations. So we provided them with an assessment involving our faculty of how we did meeting the recommendations from 2013's decennial report, and they'll spend a day and a half here. They will eventually produce a modest summary of their findings, which will hopefully be, I sit on the committee that reviews these at NEASC, and I know that my meetings are, the next meeting would be in October, and while I can't vote on our own school's report, we would likely have an official report in October, but an unofficial report would come sooner than that. So that's next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that there'll be a team here from NEASC. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, we'll move on to new business. May I ask for a motion for the items in the surplus?
I'll make a motion that we surplus those items listed.
Okay. Motion made by Handel.
I'll second it.
Second by Whitman. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. Warrants.
Warrants, 1800, 1801, 18B, 19, 19A, 19B, 20, 20A, and 20B, and 2000, in total of $1,263,846.53.
Second.
Second by Noel. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Any requests for action? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Motion made by Whitman.
Motion to adjourn?
Second made by Cohasset. Any discussion? All in favor?
Hey,
All right, great. Thank you.
put your track sheet.